Remember back to all of the news coverage of Donald Trump as a candidate for president when he was the Republican nominee. All of the negative press, but still press. And you've heard people say, any press is good press. And the mainstream media learned that the hard way when they pushed their Pied Piper Hillary Clinton strategy of make Donald Trump the guy we have to go against, and then put him everywhere so he's an easy target. That backfired, obviously, because everyone had a chance to hear Donald Trump, and he had a true message against the establishment. Ruh-roh. So, if a free market allows for the best, most valuable ideas to be traded in heaviest, we can't allow that, right? We have to quiet down the ideas we don't like, because they may be the most valuable, and they'll be traded in the heaviest, and we don't want that. We don't want people repeating things that they like to hear if we don't like them. So we just won't let them say it. That's what we're going to get to. In 2018, they said, hey, we really need to have a conversation about how much coverage we gave Trump, because that was a huge reach for his message. And people have the right to speak up, but they don't have the right to just say whatever they want and have you hear it. If a conservative screams bloody murder in the woods, but there's only leftists around to censor them, did they really make a sound? We don't know. But look at the article just from yesterday, Columbia Journalism Review. They're discussing how we need to fix America's information ecosystem. Because as Brian Stelter pointed out today, and this is the big point of the video that I want to listen to this, he says essentially, we have an ecosystem problem, but it's pollution of information. And if it's conservative information, it's really dangerous pollution. It's our information climate that's under attack. And so these are essentially info terrorists. You and I could be considered domestic information terrorists because we are conservative and we don't believe in being censored. So I'll jump in when I think it's appropriate, but I want to try to just give you a good run at Brian Stelter. Earlier, I guess this was 2 days ago, this was posted. He thinks that, as these other news stories have suggested, you can limit someone's speech, but it's not censorship. You're just kind of keeping them in a bubble. They're allowed to yell, but yell into the void, yell into their own little closet. They're not allowed to share their idea. They can speak, but to no one. And we'll make sure with algorithms on social media. Take a listen.
There is, up in the sky, information pollution. And the polluters are trying to deflect blame. Dishonest cries of censorship are filling Fox's airwaves with charges that these guys right here are being suppressed. The word censorship's been invoked almost 400 times on Fox this month alone, and more than 300 times on Newsmax. You know, post-insurrection, a book publisher decided that it did not want to be in business with Senator Josh Hawley, so he's been on a national TV tour claiming he's muzzled. And Tucker Carlson is telling viewers that this network, CNN, is trying to force Fox News off the air, which is patently false. It's as predictable as the sunrise. Democrats win elections, and then Republicans say they are being silenced. But while some...
Really quickly, if it is so predictable that every time Democrats win elections, conservatives feel and voice their opinions of being silenced, shouldn't that tell you a pattern of abuse or harassment or some other pattern that you should be aware of? Every time Democrats win elections, the other team tells you immediately, hey, we don't feel this is correct. We don't even feel this is right. And the way that you're treating us is wrong.
Cry cancel culture. Let me suggest a different way to think about this. A harm reduction model. Most people want clean air and blue skies and accurate news and rational views. And then in that healthy environment that looks beautiful, then we can have great fights about taxes and regulation and healthcare and all the rest.
Most Germans just wanted good economics, good healthcare, good labor laws, a good political system to live in, without all the other nonsense, right, from the other tribe. They could get through it all so long as they could get rid of the harm. They needed to reduce the harm in Germany in the 1930s.
The vast majority of people can agree that disinformation about, let's say, the pandemic is unhealthy. It's harmful. So how can that harm be reduced? Well, big tech platforms say they are removing lies about vaccines and stamping out Stop the Steal BS and QAnon cult content. Now, do these private companies have too much power? Sure. And many people would say yes, of course they do. But reducing a liar's reach is not the same as censoring freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is different than freedom of reach.
Let me see if I can do this again. Jewish culture is bad, and so the Nazi Germans, they were, yes, they had too much power, but they, apparently, according to Brian Stelter, they were doing it for you. They were doing it for the common good, for your safety, because the Jewish misinformation and disinformation is dangerous. Of course, I'm not really saying that, and I don't think Brian Stelter is saying that either, but if his words can be removed and replaced with religious affiliations instead of political ones, or if you could say instead of harm, Jews, right, instead of the word harm, replace it with Jews, not harm Jews. Understand, he sounds like he's reading from Mein Kampf. That I'm not limiting your freedom to life. I'm just cutting off your rights not to die. Right? Hey, I'm not saying you can't freely speak. I'm just saying that we will give you obscene consequences for that free speech. Is it free if you're paying for it in every other aspect of your life? That's what they're going for. They want to make sure that you're doing that. You're paying for it.
And algorithmic reach is part of the problem. Now, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg seems to agree. Here's the headline from Politico. He's pledging to depoliticize Facebook. Zuckerberg says one of the top pieces of feedback that we're hearing from our community is that people don't want politics and fighting to take over their experience on our services. Well, he's several years too late, but that is a real issue. And he wants to now try to clean up Facebook. But this is bigger than Facebook. This harm happens all over the place. In the words of a recently fired Fox News editor, news consumers are both overfed and malnourished at the same time, gorging on empty informational calories, indulging their sugar fixes of self-affirming half-truths and even outright lies.
Does he have a mirror? I'm serious. Does this Michelin Man wannabe have a mirror?
It's impossible to make all those lies go away, but they can be reduced. All right? Harm reduction.
If you are considered harm, if they label you for reduction, better watch out. Right? If you are harm that needs to be reduced, then they're coming for you. But if you claim you are going to be censored, well, that's misinformation, young man. You're going to be sent to your room without dinner for misinforming people of your censorship. Now be censored for having said that.
But instead we get this over on Newsmax. Look at this. Biden's plan to destroy America. It looks like some crazy comic book movie or something, or some action hero movie. That's what we get on Newsmax. Here's what we get on Fox. Tucker Carlson declaring that unity for Dems means locking up their opponents and, quote, you can now be arrested for saying the wrong thing. What? And the government is at war with its own people. What? This apocalyptic stuff is day in, day out on these channels. It is part of a radicalization pipeline that pits neighbors against neighbor and lets fear overpower courage.
You are being radicalized if you are at all aware of the other side's propaganda against Americanism and American ideals. He's saying to you, and forget Fox, because he's also citing OAN and Newsmax. If you are watching any conservative news that has any kind of real traction, any kind of real branding, then you are dangerous for being aware of the veil having been lifted and for your eyes to be clear to the truth. You're dangerous because you know too much. You've seen too much. You know that little man behind the curtain looks an awful lot like Brian Stelter. Not all that powerful and magical and wondrous when it's a bald troll.
And it poisons American politics. To borrow the pollution metaphor again, the people who live closest to the factory, who ingest most of the pollution, they get the sickest. But everyone is affected by this toxic information world. So most of the criticism of Facebook is not aimed at stopping social media, stamping it out. It's about making the platform actually more social, helping friendships, not ruining them. And most of the criticism of Fox News is not aimed at shutting it down, which will never happen anyway. It's about making Fox better.
Yeah, they don't want to shut Fox down because then all of their investment would go away. No. Fox has a good infrastructure. They have some base left. They just need to get better. They just need Obamacare 2.0. They need something like a vaccine they just need to be put back to sleep, I suppose.
Putting the news back in Fox News. They keep going the other way. If Fox is going to keep transitioning into the 24/7 Tucker channel, then maybe it belongs next to Sci-Fi on your channel lineup, not MSNBC. These need to be nuanced conversations, not edicts, not orders. This is complicated, but harm reduction is possible.
There's that harm reduction again. Better not be someone they don't like. I was going to say minority, but unless it's an ideological minority in their eyes, I think you should be fine.
Harm reduction is possible by adding more news and less opinion to the content. Harm reduction is possible by pushing some of the QAnon craziness out of your newsfeed on Facebook.
Why would you have to push anything that's been associated with QAnon out of the news? Couldn't you just say we'll only report things that are true? If something that the QAnon group was trending all of a sudden, would you block it regardless of whether it was true or not? I think we know the answer. But it's odd that they're that blatant about it. Hey, if this group likes it, we're blocking it. What if it's true, Brian? Well, we don't know. Could it be? We wouldn't know if it was true or not. Well, that would require research.
This is not ultimately about freedom of speech. It's about freedom of reach. And with me now is someone who's thought a lot about this, Nick Kristof. He's the author and New York Times columnist who recently penned a letter to my conservative friends. I had some really important messages in this column, Nick, so thanks for coming on and talking about it.
Okay, just two more things, and then I will shut up for the rest of the video. He will tell you that it is egregious to even discuss some of these topics on the news because they're just so wrong, so false. I mean, it would be like, CNN having the KKK on or something like this. This would never happen. Oh, whoops, I suppose it did happen. Yikes. And only 2 years ago. So this isn't like a way back when it wasn't as volatile. No, this is 2018. Trying to popularize the idea of the KKK, so they're putting it on CNN. That's propaganda. That's disinformation, because there's only 2,500 active KKK members in the country, and there's only another 1,500 that consider themselves white nationalists. And you know that because there are less than 5,000 in total that have any kind of claim or ideology in the United States, which means when they say that white males being the highest rates of terrorists in the United States, that is propaganda. That is misinformation. They put it on their news for what reason other than to demoralize you? So he's about to tell you that they would never do this, that they would never talk to someone like a KKK or a white supremacist on the news. I mean, that would be absurd. No, the rest of this is absurd, but it's 5 minutes more, so enjoy it. And then before you leave this video, before you click onto something else, make sure that you give it a like, you click the hyperlink, and you drop it in a box somewhere. Go share this link somewhere. It does help. Pay for the internet with it if you could. And then check out Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, YouTube, Gab. Search for America Floats. And then give it a subscribe. Give it a like. Give it a follow. Give it a little support button if there is one. Truly would help. Fight this. This is chaos. This is absolute censorship and anarchical brainwashing from the mainstream news to try to get you to just desert any oath you've taken to defend the Constitution. Don't let up. Keep the fight strong and keep America afloat.
I'm delighted.
You've been saying a lot lately about Fox, and I'm interested in hearing it. What overall is the message that you believe right-wing, Trump voters are hearing from their media outlets of choice, and how are those messages deceiving them?
Well, Brian, I'm speaking to you right now from the family farm I grew up on in rural Oregon. And, I have a lot of pro-Trump friends here who are glued to Fox. And it's been really sad to see them absorb a message that the coronavirus is nothing serious, that masks don't work, that Trump won re-election, and that the big danger is from Antifa rather than the right. And, I believe in diversity of opinion as much as anybody. I believe we need a marketplace of ideas, but we all know that there are red lines. We wouldn't let a KKK grand wizard preach racism, divisiveness on a cable channel. And it seems to me that Fox and OAN and Newsmax have genuinely cost lives with the way they've reported, quote unquote, the pandemic. And, I think that red line needs to be drawn in a way that will minimize the kind of damage that I see here and that we've seen nationwide. It's not about censorship today.
On the pandemic, we're at the last day of January. This is the deadliest month of the pandemic in America thus far. There are some signs that we're trending in the right direction, starting to come down from those awful high levels of hospitalizations. But this month, this has been the worst month yet in the pandemic. And yet that story is not frequently told from these pro-Trump right-wing sources. And they are still very much pro-Trump. I know Trump is the former president, but these outlets are still more Trumpy than they are Republican. And I think that's an important distinction. You wrote in your column that you feel like a lot of folks are being deceived by these outlets, that they're being conned. So you're saying the profit model is part of the problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I had friends here who reached out to me because they were concerned after watching Fox that they were going to be locked up in re-education camps for supporting Trump. And, at one level, that was ridiculous, but it also pained me. And, this is the kind of thing that led Ashley Babbitt to go and invade the Capitol and get shot. And it's what leads Fox viewers to disdain masks, to avoid vaccination. I think we recognize that if a major network were encouraging people to drink arsenic to improve their complexion, then advertisers would desert that network and cable companies wouldn't carry that network. And it feels to me as if some of the extreme right-wing media organizations are doing something very similar.
Fox News is definitely the Trump administration in exile now. Stephen Miller all over the channel. They just hired Larry Kudlow. They're in talks with Kayleigh McEnany. Your message in your column is that people shouldn't be forced to subsidize Fox News in their basic cable packages. Now, Tucker will say you're trying to destroy the channel. What are you actually arguing?
I'm trying to save a right-wing opposition, which we need to keep us honest. And, I'm progressive. I think it's really important that there are sensible right-wing critics who hold my feet to the fire, who will disagree with me. But that doesn't mean that we need extremists who are preaching things that end up killing people. And at the end of the day, it also strikes me as deeply offensive when we all buy products that then support that kind of hatred and disinformation. And when we have to pay, as you say, for cable packages that then subsidize companies that are doing a lot of damage, mostly to their own audience, but to some degree to the country as a whole.
I got to tell you, the sources I have at Fox, they are concerned about the extremist content on that network. They are worried about it just like you are. So you're far from the only one.